A period in her life that was very painful. There was a great deal of suffering in her life, and she couldn't find any relief for that. In fact, she said it was so significant she just couldn't stop crying. She just couldn't stop crying. And so at that point, her friends and her mother saw her in this condition and said, Marianne, you need to get some therapy. And her snarky way, she said, you think? You think? She knew she was suffering, and she knew she had to get some help. So she did. She set up an appointment with a psychiatrist. And in a way only Marianne can, she walks into the psychiatrist's office and she says, now look, I'm a student of this set of books called A Course in Miracles. Now, if I walk in here and you start telling me that this stuff is crazy and it's delusional, you really need some serious psychiatric help, and A Course in Miracles isn't it. She said, this isn't going to work. I just want you to know that right up front. It was at that moment that he reached, grabbed his book, sat down a book called A Course in Miracles, and he says, I just finished the work. To her amazement and her soul's journey, she had been led to a psychiatrist who was a student of A Course in Miracles. It wasn't long after that in her journey that she felt this presence at the edge of her bed. She come to know later that presence was the presence of Jesus. And she's still in her life where there's still this suffering going on. She's still working through it. And in that moment, she makes a deal with God. And her deal is this: God, if you will help me get my life back together, then I will dedicate the rest of my life to you. She made a deal with God. Marianne did experience some healing after that. And it was at this time when she told that presence, she says, now listen, I really appreciate what you've done for me, but you can go now. So go help somebody else. I'm sure there's plenty out there. So not long after that, she goes to this cocktail party, right? Marianne went into a mystical experience. And one of the men in the tuxedos turned his face, and it was the face of Jesus. And Jesus said to her, I thought we had a deal. I thought we had a deal. And that set her on her 40-plus year journey. And you know the story, or many of you know the story. 40, their soul in a sacred bond with God through a very soul-level vow, down in the soul. Marianne made a vow with God that if God would show her a way through her intense suffering, be lifted out of that, and a way to get her life back together, she would give her life in service to God. That way was clearly a way of serving and healing and becoming conscious of teaching this way of healing through atonement. Now, a neder is not some kind of casual promise, and it's not some kind of legalistic contract with God. Rather, a neder is a deep-seated internal realignment of turning away from the ego as autonomy and turning towards this intense devotion to serving God. A neder binds one's soul in a deep bond. And here's the thing the Jewish mystics teach. In many ways, unity is Jewish mysticism, is what it is. It's very clear when you unpack this stuff. Here's the thing the Jewish mystics teach about a neder, about a soul agreement, a deep-level soul agreement, is that a neder invites mystical experience. A neder invites direct experience with God. Your deep soul, yes, invites direct encounter with God. In Jewish mysticism, the act of making a neder is seen as a deliberate mechanism to alter the spiritual architecture of the universe and draw down divine light. And you can see this in many of the stories in the Jewish mystical scriptures. The answer is, we know our neder by our name. Our name, or our soul patterns, that we can become conscious of carries how we will fulfill the sacred contract we have made with our whole self before we incarnated. You see this beautifully illustrated in the story of Jonah in the Bible. It's so beautifully illustrated. Now, Jonah's name means dove. Dove, right? And a dove is one who descends for the soul to ascend, right? You can see that in all the stories, right? The dove comes down and it brings this whole new order of heaven on earth, harmony. We can send into harmony and into peace on earth. And so the dove, that's its, you see that in Marianne. It's totally in her ministry. My name means beloved, or union, or two is one. And I definitely had a mystical experience that was that exact pattern. Very clear. But let's look at how Jonah sees this neder work through his name. But more importantly, he makes his vow, and he's completely suffocated, and he makes this vow. It's a vow that he will go to Nineveh and call them to return back to the ways of God. It's another way of saying he will descend, and through his own life, he will demonstrate how to ascend, and that will call others back. He descends down into the sea and he suffers. He's running. He's running from his agreement. And he finally ends up in a descent down into the belly of a whale. It really says a great fish, but we've had so much fun with that over there that they turned it into the whale, right? We're down in the belly of the whale. Now, if you read the story and the fulfillment of it through the soul's name, the more he runs from his soul agreement, the more fragmented his life becomes and the more chaotic it becomes. But he reaches this point and he remembers his vow in the midst of the jam he's in. Fulfill my vow, my neder, salvation, liberation from the, if you're looking for the grace to come back in, the magic to come back in, you got to get centered and say yes. I say yes. The one who descended to ascend, he's immediately expelled onto the dry land. And Jonah's conscious yes to his vow expels him and sends him into new life. For he descended to ascend. That's what a dove does. It's in his name. The key shift for Jonah was not removing descent, wasn't running from his name. The key shift was that he began to discover that he's energetically configured to descend for ascension. Know your neder you have made with God, and know how you're energetically configured. It's in your name. Don't run. The first time I spoke here at Renaissance Unity, it was in 2016. Reverend Dana asked me to speak. And I got done speaking, and it was a great experience for me. And afterwards, Nadine Miller's mother came up to me. Does anybody remember Nadine Miller's mother? Yes. She came up to me and she laid her hand on my heart. And she said, David, you're running. Stop running. I said, whoa. You're running. Stop running. Show up for your vow. You've been given a name to fulfill it. You have been given a name. You have been energetically configured to fulfill the vow you made before you incarnated.